Hello and welcome. Thank you very much for joining us for the first of our new series of webinars and interviews that we're calling the Inside Track. This is the first one, which we're really excited to present, which we're going to be talking with Mr. Jamie Lidell, who I see has popped up. How are you doing, Jamie?
I'm very well, yeah. How are you?
So good to see you. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, nice to see you too.
We're talking across 6 time zones, I think.
They said it couldn't be done. I'm actually asleep right now, but you know, my unconscious is often more lucid than my conscious. So you know,
awesome.
let him take control.
So, is that a dummy head behind you there?
Yeah, I figured if I couldn't do this interview, I'll hand it over to Fritz. Oh, it's over my wrong shoulder. Isn't that weird? It's like the Zoom mirror thing. Yeah. It's a new thing. So good. As good as they say. It's weird. It's amazing. It's great. You know, simple things. Like if, you know, you try to record. See, this is a thing for me, doing a lot of looping. Say you just feel like, I'm just going to record a bunch of claps now to make this whole thing sound a bit, you know, more human, a bit more moving. You say you've got like a regular mono mic where you start stacking claps, they start to get really, I mean, you can move around the room and it gives a sense of something. You do that on this thing, it's just like, it's perfection. It just sounds like it's really happening. It's really like a world of difference anyway. I wish they weren't so expensive. It's just ludicrous.
You're actually using it as a dummy head. It's not just a studio friend.
Yeah, well, that is quite a sad idea. But hey, you know, it is quite weird. Sometimes you kind of, it's less of a studio friend, more of a sort of a surprise and like, oh God, just forget it's there, and it's sort of, you know, its human form can do a bit of a, you know, a sort of a surprise pseudo spooky number on you, but you know, they don't advertise that in the brochure. But yeah, it's cool.
So I wanted to introduce you a bit. People might have come across you in lots of different ways. Possibly like this, doing podcasting. That's
right. Recent. Yeah, although I don't usually appear. I'm usually, you know, behind the wall of the pod. The pod garden.
Pajamas.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not far off today, to be honest.
So actually, I should probably cue up why we're here. Apart from that, you know, I've got a ton of things I've always wanted to ask you. But with the idea of this kind of webinar series, actually, was to just get a chat with some people who've kind of made successful careers in the stuff that Avid does. So music,
yes,
and TV and film and broadcast and all that stuff, and kind of learn how you got into it and what you've been doing, and the usual kind of advice for the people that would like to do something similar.
Not the usual advice. You can get the usual advice anywhere. This is going to be, but I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's just me being annoying. But
no, it's sort of interesting, actually, for me, how much it might have changed, I guess.
I suppose that's my nervousness coming over, like, will I be able to give novel new advice? Because that is something I take really seriously, because, you know, doing the pod, it's been 4 years of doing the pod and trying to do things like the nitty part of the show where I, you know, try to demonstrate techniques. I mean, it gets kind of increasingly difficult over time because I feel like, I've done quite a lot of the things I like to do.
Yeah.
So finding new things, I think this is quite a YouTube phenomena too, sort of when people are kind of, you know, out there always sharing tips and tricks, you sort of almost hit a wall at a certain point where you're like, let's go back to music theory, because it's sort of like, it's always useful. Do you know what I mean? Anyway, that's an aside.
I know, but
yes.
It's easy to get burnt out, I guess, for people that are doing the kind of online content.
Yeah. It can be, yeah. But then again, music is bizarre, isn't it? Because it just keeps on giving. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It never gets
actually, that was
one
of the reasons why I wanted to chat with you, was because you seem to have done quite a few different things. And I mean, I don't know, I've probably made up a story for you, but it seems like you've kind of done what you wanted to do, not really just followed any of the sort of traditional grooves.
Yeah. Well, hey, I suppose in certain regards that's definitely true. I was on Warp Records, for example, for 14 years. So in that regard, that's very much a label that doesn't was all staunchly independent, you know. It wasn't the kind of independent label that was under a major label in some regard, you know. It was its own thing. So they left me alone, by and large, to do my thing, which at the time I was really kind of, I suppose I was more of a tricky artist type, you know, that always wanted the impossible and always felt like I was being kind of like, you know, mistreated in some way or other by the label. You know, I didn't really know how to play with a team. It was tricky in some regards, but in retrospect, it was a great label to be on, and such a creative sort of world. Everyone making music there, obviously remarkably talented, and that kind of set me down a road, I suppose, of and not really having too much experience with dealing with the major label mentalities, for example. Too much of that, like gun to the head, deadline stuff either. So, look, that's a blessing and a curse, I think, because I know for myself, I'm pretty rubbish without deadlines. You know, I wish I wasn't. And I try my best to sort of enforce or put deadlines on myself, give myself exercises and everything. But I think you need to know the kind of person you are. Sometimes you really need to be in a system where you need to deliver things on a Monday morning, and it actually suits you more, and you might feel better about yourself than if you're given carte blanche and you're, you know, the freedom is supposed to be this great liberator, but it can actually be for some people quite challenging. And I know plenty of creative people that have really just not been able to live up to their potential, let's say, because they kind of are perfectionists and will tinker basically forever on something, and it's diminishing returns. In fact, they basically don't do anything. Yeah. And seeing that is always really depressing. So anyway, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I might come back to that because I'm sort of curious, whether you are a bit more kind of just free to do what you want to do now. But let me take it back. Because
please, yeah.
Thank you. Because I first came across you with Super Collider, which
great.
Yeah. That was what a great band.
Thank you.
Yeah, I came across you guys at a great time when I think a lot of electronic music and dance music, especially on the live performance side, was getting a little bit stale for me anyway. And it was just like, wow, here's some people that are doing some really funky stuff that you can play.
Right. Yeah.
And
it was
you
good.
And I don't know if you remember Stuart Price's band Low Rhythm Digital.
Yeah, absolutely.
Were like, wow, these guys are like a rock band doing electronic music. This is great stuff. But how did that come about? Was that your first kind of thing? Or were you doing stuff before that?
Definitely doing stuff before that, you know, the usual, stuff at school. You know, I was always into music. I was sort of, funnily enough, I was in a band with the drummer of Slowdive, Simon Scott. He went to my school. He was like the cool kid at school with the skinniest jeans and the coolest hair, and just like, I felt really lucky that I got to hang with him, basically, because I was much more of a nerd, still am. But he taught me, for example, he kind of gave me the advice to buy Tego Mago by Can, which like totally changed my world. And, that was a lucky school experience. It wasn't a regular school experience in that regard. Now I look back at it. But I was playing guitar then. I just wanted to be Prince. So I just sort of had Prince shit on my walls and got all the same pedals as he had. I saved up my lunch money. I didn't get a full lunch so that I could get like 80p of the lunch. I had like beans on toast every day. I mean, I could have got a job, but I mean, eventually saving 80p every day kind of got me towards a Boss pedal after a certain amount of time. So then I afforded like 4 or 5 Boss pedals, and just sit in my room playing pentatonic madness, probably driving my mum crazy, and playing a trombone at the same time randomly, and doing sort of due diligence and turning up to these kind of very formal sort of brass band meetings every week, and sort of playing second trombone for years, really not really enjoying it, but giving me a lot of ear training, I think, because because the trombone hasn't got a fixed position, you really need to use your ear to tune. I came to realise later doing looping that a lot of my sense of pitch probably came from that time. Right. I suppose this is a roundabout, rambling kind of story to say that music had been swirling around. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't just like it kind of, obviously for no one, it just sort of just lands. But, you know, and I got so much positive attention from early school teachers who basically always put me in plays and, you know, would make me sing. I think my first gig, I mean, it is for me at least. I was a squirrel in doing a squirrel soliloquy for a school play. It was one of my. Yeah, exactly. It was a very proud moment. I got to gather. I didn't gather my nuts, but I was definitely a nervous young child doing a performance, and I think I liked that attention. Do you know what I mean? I liked the fact that I could do this music thing. And my mum was always a really serious musician. She still is a great, you know, she can read, she can sing off the sheet music, which I definitely can't do. She's still doing all kinds of singing in sort of formal settings with big choirs and doing really ambitious stuff. So I was always a bit like the punk, you know. I couldn't really play. I didn't have a piano. I could do trombone a bit. But then at school, I just got into guitar, and because I didn't have anything else. But then when I was about 16 years old, I was always going to London and going down Turnkey and the music shops and checking out the newest tech. You know, at that time, it was the D50, Korg M1, you know, the Akai S950, and my grandma gave me like £2,000, like from some kind of inheritance. It's more money than I'd ever seen. And I actually bought all my equipment from the US because it was like a 2-to-1 ratio or something. It was an amazing exchange rate. And I remember for that money, I got like an S950, Korg M1, I got a little Tascam 4-track, SM58, and Alesis MIDI Verb 3. Wow. And that was my setup. And actually my first gig, I didn't know what to do with it, to be honest. I just had I thought, I really need a sampler. This is the new thing. I kept reading about it. I was avidly reading like these, avidly. You can use it like that, yeah. But I was checking out all the music mags and just thinking, okay, these samplers, what's the deal? I got this sampler and I just didn't know what to do with it, to be honest. But eventually, a guy in the little village I was living in, Brampton, just outside Huntingdon, Cambridgeshire, name check Brampton, rave crew. There isn't much there, but
there was me, actually.
Is it not? Yeah. They see, you know, the vibe. I mean, basically some sort of relatively, I don't want to use a term like disparagingly, but he seemed a bit shady. This guy in the neighbourhood somehow caught wind. Now, this story is not clear in my mind, but it's absolutely true. Caught wind that I had a sampler and I was about 16 and was like, oh man, you know, he gave me like a Breaks record, and I started to get hip to the idea of sampling off Breaks records. And I'd go down to Cambridge and I'd get like a street sound. I'll get a couple of like Breaks records, and I'd be like, oh yeah. And now I see what the sampler's for. You know, you can give yourself a backbeat that's not horrible. Because I actually had this Yamaha drum machine for a while that was a true turd. It was like an RX-15 or something. It was horrible, that thing. Yeah. And I just thought, how are you going to make music on this? Because obviously I did the thing as a young kid, so I'm giving the whole story now, but of like, you know, doing the two tape decks in my mum's living room. You know, everyone did that. You had to do that. That's a rite of passage if you're into recording. You know, play it off the speakers, record it on the other little one over here and do the second track. And the hiss levels was, I mean, you know, it's borderline hipster. It was hipster noise levels at that time. So we wanted to get rid of noise, and so like I would try to get these really pristine samples into the S950. The guy came along and said, hey, do you want to do a gig? And I was like, what? I mean, because I started to do these sort of novelty sort of hardcore tunes, because at about that time I started getting to rave. Yeah. You know, it was just early rave. And I got a couple of rave cassettes and I was just like, this is amazing. And I could kind of make it, because it's not hard to make in a way, but you just got to, and I kind of had the right stabs and I started to get the right breaks. And my first gig was opening for The Prodigy, which is the most random thing in the Peterborough ice rink. Like, he gave me this gig. He said, yeah, you've got some tunes. Why don't you come and open up? And I mean, dude, I I was like so out of my depth. I bowled up with my whole studio rig. Do you know what I mean? I had all the stuff I had, but that mixer I was using was like a Tascam 4-track or something. That was my line level mixer, and it was pretty poor. The levels it was just not hitting the PA right. And then basically Prodigy came on after and just blew my mind, man. Like, it was the most formative music moment in a way, because I was like, whoa, I mean, I have machines that are not that different to these guys, but how come this is coming out the speakers? Like, it really was a total mystery to me, man. Yeah. I was just like, all right. It was that. And also, like I said, the school experience was a bit bizarre, because I also had a school friend, this guy called Ben Mulder, who's Alan Mulder's nephew.
Wow.
Or something. Or yeah, so it was was Alan nephew? Yeah, it was a relation of Alan Mulder, obviously. Shares the same name. But he said, oh, do you want to go and see, my uncle doing a mix? And he was working at the church studio. Now Paul Epworth's, at the time it was, I guess it was Dave Stewart's from the Eurythmics, who had it before David Gray, and then now it's Epworth's. But yeah, man, there I was at the church with Alan Mulder doing a mix of Curve on an SSL. And that was another one of those moments where I was like, all right, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I mean, because I heard what was really cool actually about that whole experience was I heard the basic tracks come up on the board, and I'd made a little bit of music at that point, pretty shitty stuff with just some MIDI in my machines. But then I heard the music come out. I was like, oh, it's not too far from what I'm doing. So, I mean, cool. I mean, I was like, oh, it's a bit disappointing, really. I thought it was going to really be amazing. But then in about 10 or 15 minutes, Alan had it just sounding bonkers. He was just moving so fast. He's just doing these big, broad strokes. I mean, stuff I didn't understand, compression, EQ, la, 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 just fixing it, making it sound huge. And I was like, again, one of those moments of he's got kind of things I understand, but there's something completely different going on here. So that just made me fascinated, slightly intimidated, but I guess I had the arrogance of youth to go, I can do it.
Yeah. So was that it? Was that okay, this is what I want to do now?
Yeah, and I remember having that sort of that day at school where they're like, "All right, Jamie, what you gonna do when you grow up? It was like that day of what do you call it? Careers day or something." And I was like, "I want to be a record producer," and they were like, "Well, yeah, you want to put something proper down on there as well." Do you know what I mean? And I was like, "You bastards! You don't even." No one believes in this. Mum, in fairness, I love my mum and she didn't really get it, I don't think either. She wasn't disparaging, but I think it is one of those things where it's yeah, you might want a plan B. Do you know what I mean? But at that point I was like, no. I'm one of those people who needs someone to say you can't do it a little bit. It's not one of my best personality traits. I don't know if it's quite as potent as it was when I was younger, but I needed that. I needed someone to go, you can't do that, and I'm like, oh, I'll show you, kind of.
Was there even courses and stuff you could do at that point, or
there might have been? Yeah.
What was your move?
Yeah, I mean, basically, I didn't really have a move. I sort of just kept making music. And I'm getting to Super Collider. Sorry, I sort of just took it way back. When I was born, there was a hummingbird.
Part 1 of the series.
Yeah, no, sorry.
No, it's great.
But we're getting close. I went to university at Bristol. Took all my rig with me. Slightly evolved it. Got a better Mac, although it's a terrible Mac. It was a LC2 or something. I don't know if people remember those. There was not a capable Mac, certainly not for audio. But before that, I'd been using an Atari ST with Cubase, the classic, because the Atari ST, for those who don't know, has MIDI on it, on the machine itself, which is pretty slick and still pretty awesome. But so there I went there, and again, school connections. coming through. I'd been making these songs, just in my bedroom, start to sing a bit more, as I'd done for years, but just sort of, not with any real purpose, I suppose. There was some musical kids at my school, and we were all kind of vying for being like cool bands and like, whatever, but it was all pretty low key. But I sent my demo tape to this kid who went to Strong Room Studios, he passed it on to someone at Strong Room, this guy Mick Shiner, who sort of went on to manage the Streets and other. Great Mick. Mick's an amazing guy. He's a big music fan and a big advocate of new talent, and just like a great supportive energy. I mean, he really did a lot for me, Mick. He basically brought me to the studio. I'd sent in one sort of ravey track. It was pretty bad, really, but it had some potential. It was really simple. And he said, "There you go." He threw me into the big SSL room on my own with my school friend Patrick, and just was like, "Go." And I was like, thing is, at home with my little Mackie mixer or whatever, I could kind of get it sounding better than I could on the SSL because I didn't know what I was doing. And they didn't have an S950, so I had to put all my samples onto an S3000, and it just didn't work on the S3000. I suppose I should now in retrospect. It just didn't have the funk of the S950. It's a different machine. The S3000 was a powerful machine, but definitely didn't have the sound. So anyway, I struggled, and I didn't really like what I did that day. But there I was, all of a sudden in Strong Room A, just on my own, given the keys to the mansion, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it was a crazy moment, and basically that didn't really go anywhere. But accidentally almost, I met two other guys there, Phil Wells and Jason Leach, and we made Subhead, just the three of us. I had all the technical know-how at that point. I knew how to make tracks, build stuff. They were like connected to the techno scene, especially like the Detroit, Chicago sounds, things I'd never heard before actually. In Bristol, where I went to college, it was more trance and sort of acid, but like pretty bad in a way. I was happy to be in Bristol at the time because it was just when Portishead and Massive Attack were really having their moment. So it was a great music scene in Bristol. It was awesome. But then the electronics music wasn't that great. So they suddenly schooled me on Chicago, Detroit music. I'd never heard it before. And I was like, oh my God, this is it, This is what I've been missing,
Right.
So the three of us sort of set to work and did loads of work as Subhead. We did like about 10 EPs in about a year, I think. We did just tons. Every weekend I'd go up to London and we'd just make these tracks. And we were using Mick Shiner's studio at the time, which was in Strong Room, but just across the way. It had a lot more gear than I had. It had a 909, and I could sort of learn all the gear. We had an Ord lead that just come out. We had some new stuff to work with, and I was really getting to grips with this new setup. And then that got taken away a little bit, and that whole stopped. But I moved to Brighton. And randomly, on the first day I was there, I saw a Tresor record bag like on the ground at this festival. And I was like, what? And there's a girl there with it. And I was like, are you Christian's sister? And she's like, no, I'm Christian's girlfriend. Christian Vogel, that is.
Yeah.
Because I'd basically gone to Brighton to look for Christian, like on a fool's errand almost. I was like, a bit like...
Completely bonkers.
It's totally bonkers, man. No, it's 100% true, 100% true. I mean, it wasn't completely out of the question because it was a festival in Brighton, do you know what I mean? And it wasn't that big. So chances are they might have been at a music festival, but still, seeing the Tresor bag, and obviously you need to know what that was, but I did, obviously, I knew that scene. And sort of the rest is history in a way. Me and Chris, the funny thing was, Christian had played a Subhead track at the Love Parade. So I said, oh yeah, I make music under the name Subhead. And she was like, what? Christian loves Subhead. Like he was like playing that at the Love Parade, and it was just like a big moment. So all of a sudden it was an instant connection, And then I sort of moved into his Christian studio, and we just started to make tracks, and I did an EP on his Mosquito label, and I did a remix of his called Don't Take More, which was a big moment for me. And then we started Supercollider, which is our pop project.
Doing stuff together and on your own at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately he kind of gave me an opportunity to use, again, much more advanced equipment. He had a nice setup. not huge, but he had an EMS synthy and a drum station, a Morpheus, and some cooler effects and a board, and that's more than I had. So, but we pulled all our equipment together, and so it's a pretty nice setup.
So it sounds like your career strategy, even though you probably didn't have it as a strategy, was to just get stuck in and follow every opportunity that you
basically, yeah.
See what happens, yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And and just, I mean, it was a different time in a way. I remember that time. It was so cool. Like, not to say it was better or anything like that, but in the mid-90s, you go to a record shop. I remember, for example, Aphex's Hangable Auto Bulb came out, whatever. It was such a moment, you know what I mean? It was such a new sound. Like, it was a revolution. Like, there was all these sort of revolutions happening in electronic music. It felt like it was right on the cutting edge, and everything was able to seismically change and shift. And so you had to sort of, like, you were there almost, you were in real time. You were seeing a scene like evolve and change, and that was really pretty amazing. The music we did at Super Collider was very bizarre in a way. We didn't even know if we liked it in a way, because it was challenging for the two of us. Yeah. But I'm glad we made it, because there was something in us that was like, yeah, but let's just do this, It was
brilliantly sort of wonky and
yeah.
And swingy, wasn't it? That's what.
Totally. Well, that's Vogel. Vogel's the master of the groove, man. He's just a monster programmer. Like, at the time I met Christian, he was using Octamed on the Amiga, tracker,
right?
And he was just incredible with it. He just for example, quick thing about Vogel, because he's a real unsung genius, I think, in the electronic world. True original. Like, he did take a lot of energy from the Detroit scene and stuff, whatever, highly revered over there. But he found his own way completely. He found his own voice. And it would take me forever to build a live set, whatever. Christian could build a live set in like 2 hours. Like, he'd just get on his equipment, he'd just be on Octamed, like, pattern 1's good, pattern 2, nice, pattern 1, pattern 2's jamming like on the board. Like, he was done. He just got a few moods and it was like, it's going to be amazing. He didn't over-rehearse it. It was just like, he had like sort of a dub mentality of just like, just jam it, just make it happen, just punk. Just sort of like not too much preparation. It was just all feeling. And there was a lot of ragged edges because of that. But that's what, I live for that.
Yeah, so I guess you were doing similar things with the kind of live improvising thing and stuff.
Yeah. The Super Collider shows were really fun. Like, they were really adventurous. We really went in. I wish there was more archive footage of that stuff. We had a great show at Sonar, for example. That was historic for me. That was just so fun. That was like, it was amazing.
And were you singing before Super Collider? I wasn't sure. I imagined that you just discovered. I don't know where I came up with this.
Yeah.
Because I think I listened to Super Collider and I assumed that it was samples. I thought it was like Stevie Wonder sample.
Yeah. No, fair enough, man.
I had this imagine that you'd one day discovered that you could sing, but you were singing before that.
A little bit, yeah. No, I was. Like I say, at school and all of that, and at college, I was in a band, and then also in Brighton, I was in a band called Balzac, and before I was in a band called Caned and Abel.
Nice.
Yeah, singing some like jazzy licks. But yeah, it was good though. It was a good band. But it was definitely part of that sort of acid jazz thing.
Right.
That was
big at the time as well.
Yeah, totally. So we're talking about 92 or something like that. Very naive stuff, but actually pretty good. Terrible name,
cool. I seem to remember it being like quite tribal between the kind of techno heads and the acid jazz tribes,
which is weird, really. Yeah, it's silly. Yeah, I'm glad people like Carl Craig, or like the sort of more musical, quote unquote musical side. I mean, I like both. I like the serious. I can understand the backlash against the sort of the seventh chords and the kind of the frilliness of it in a way, versus like. But then then it's basically, for me, it's sort of just a continuation of where Stevie was going, and who hates Stevie? You had to be a fool. So it's like, you're not allowed to like Stevie if you like, acid tracks. It's like, whatever. See, that always burdened me about the electronic music world in a way, because in time, I think it did become, at least in my perception, more like a bit of a boys' club of like faster, harder, louder, And I sort of kind of gave up on it a little bit then. I was like, I need music because I am more driven by song, which is something that kind of I had to realize, I suppose, over time, because I like the machine music a lot, but I needed to get back to songs, which is, what happened later.
Is that right? That was my next question. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm drinking a massive water now.
Yeah, good.
It's good. Yes. Okay. Refreshed.
Yeah, no, so I'm curious, what happened next? How did you move on to kind of doing your own, the Jamie Lidell stuff?
Part 2. No, I'll try and make it concise, a bit more concise. So basically, Warp Records, I got a deal in Brighton. I was trying to impress this guy on a label that I liked so much, Spy Mania, Hardy Finn, who was like the cool kid in Brighton for me, who just had all the Mego records. He just had his finger on the most avant-garde pulse, and like there's this aesthetic that was going on as well, and there was a record label called Trash that was part of the No Future thing, which is part of Christian's thing, and so there's quite almost like a not techno thing, but just a more like the pure punk, and at that time sort of like drill and bass and like all the Outer Limits music that was going on.
Yeah.
Basically, The Wire, the stuff that was in The Wire.
Yeah.
But the really cool stuff, an amazing period, anything from Fenez to, Jim O'Rourke to, Square Pusher and so on. So anyway, Spy Mania was an amazing label, and I really wanted to do something on that label. So I actually set upon doing my first LP, which is called Muddling Gear, which came out in, I think, 1999. Although it was done a little before that. But yeah, that was a really ambitious record that, had a little bit of singing on it, and that was actually it was about the same time as Super Collider was released. I did my solo thing, although it's very much under the radar. It's definitely like a one for the heads, although it is coming out soon on cassette.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm having a reissue. I've got the music back from after all these years. I now own it, and I'm putting it out on cassette just for fun, because it's the kind of album that really would live well on cassette, because it's quite a grimy and crazy one. But that caught the attention of Warp Records because Square Pusher had gone down the same trajectory. His first record was on Spy Mania as well, and that was not something that kind of was a coincidence. I definitely had the hope that might happen, and I was at the time hanging out with Tom Jenkinson because kids in Brighton that I was hanging out with went to school with him. It's a school called Kegs, like a fancy school. Like a lot of Hardy from Spy Mania went there. This guy James Stevenson, who's a great bass player, another musician in town, and also Matthew Yeking, who's a wonderful musician, underrated, tremendous talent, and just a brilliant mind. So they were all incredibly smart, these guys, and quite intimidating in a way, but including Tom Jenkinson, who I did work with. I recorded with him on Music Is Rotted One Note, although he never credited me, but it's all good. Now you know the truth inside the track, because it's fine. Oh, I've lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, basically then that started me down the road of 14 years on Warp Records.
Yeah.
Because at the time I was signed to Rob at the label, who unfortunately died soon after I joined. It was a really tragic kind of cancer story. That was really rough, because he was the one really that saw my potential. Not to take anything away from Steve Beckett, but I think he'd agree that it was really Rob that kind of spearheaded my being on the label. Yeah. He was my advocate in a way. I think he saw when I started to do the song Daddy's Car, it was like a kind of a Prince number with like a little loop, and it showcased my R&B side, I suppose.
Yeah.
Which is definitely, like I said, I grew up with Prince, and that was just kind of how I learned about music. I grew up in a little village in Cambridge. I didn't have like a roots scene.
Right.
I grew up on the radio and records, and like, you know, that to me was my musical education. It's weird to say that because, you know, it's a tricky thing, but at the same time, I didn't really care. I just thought, I wasn't like thinking, can I do this? Can I not do that? Can I do this? Is this sacred? Is this not sacred? And, you know, I suppose, and I still, in a way, if I was to give someone advice, I think I'd err on the side of nothing is sacred versus everything is sacred. Be careful, because I feel like nothing really gets, a lot of great music has come from the nothing is sacred mentality. You know, kind of destroying stuff, merging stuff. Like, you know, there's a lot of energy that comes from that. So anyway, that's an aside. But that's how I started down the road on Warp, really. And then the rest is history. I did a bunch of albums and then, did a lot of live shows. The live shows were really the thing that kind of, you know, made it possible for me to buy this house, for example. Not to be too, you know, on the nose about it, but I played solo and it was the only way I could really make money. I moved to Berlin after I signed my deal with Warp and basically ran out of money. The advance was not big. Yeah. The deal was long, 5 albums. It was a big commitment. I didn't really realize what a commitment it was at the time. Advice to others, maybe don't take a 5-year contract.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. Would you do that now? Would you take
No, absolutely not. It doesn't make any sense in this modern climate, I don't think, at all. Even in those days, it didn't. I actually think I got let off 1 album early. I'm not a prolific guy. I didn't really do like albums every year or whatever. I wasn't like Prince. I kind of was fumbling around, getting stoned a lot and just sort of living a life in Berlin and touring, to be quite honest. I toured most of my time. And that was really a whole other thing. Doing the live thing. Basically, what happened was I found myself in Berlin. I was like, on cloud 9 in a way. I got my Warp record deal. I was like, well, I got what I wanted, but then I ran out of money. I was like, I've got to make this record and I don't have a studio and I don't have any money. Like, oh, well done. You know, now what are you going to do? So basically, I sat in my kitchen in Berlin and just sort of started hatching a plan. I basically almost did a sort of an analysis of myself. Like, what I'm never going to be as funky and amazing at the techno thing as Christian. I'm never going to be able to compete on these levels. So I can't do this, I can't do that, but I have a voice and I can improvise and maybe I should use my voice somehow. And then actually I love looping because my guitarist in my band Balzac had a looping pedal for his guitar. And I'd come in and hear him practicing and I was like, oh my God, I just love this looping. I just love it when he loops his guitar. It just did something to me. It just like made me think, this is such a cool thing. And then I actually heard Matthew Herbert do a show where he had a few little Boss pedals. It was looping, but it was just like really short little loops. But still, that was another pivotal moment for me to see the connection between an event happening and then you hearing it and just thinking, oh man, obviously it's so commonplace now with Ed Sheeran headlining Wembley as a solo looper, you know. But back in those days, it wasn't common, and I started doing the looping shows in about 2000. So 21 years ago. It was quite a bizarre thought. And there wasn't really the tech at the time. There was these Boss pedals. There was a little bit before the DL4. No, it was around about the same time as the DL4 came out, the green pedal that was so important. The Line 6 pedal, still a great pedal now. But that was really how I cut my teeth. But then I soon realized the limitations of that. And I thought, I'm going to have to get onto Max MSP and build my own looper. So I spent 6 months in the lair when everyone was worried about me, like, what are you doing? Why are you making Max? What's this? I basically stopped making music. Yeah. I taught myself Max and then made this looper. And then that damn looper was my life.
Yeah.
I opened up for Prince with that looper, James Brown, Bjork, you know. With the looper,
pretty awesome though, if you
crazy.
Be able to go down that rabbit hole like that, if something really just grabs you to just go and do it.
Hey, it was out of necessity, I'll be honest. I had a real purpose, and I think that's another thing. If you're a bit purposeless, it can be a real problem. you know. And it's I needed to make a move. I didn't have any cash, and I had to do something. So that was a lucky choice.
Is that why you moved over to Nashville? Actually, I always assumed that you'd gone to Nashville because it's where people would go to kind of work with other artists, or is it not totally to do with that?
No, I met my wife in New York after Berlin, and then we thought let's move into a house, let's buy a house. I'm like, let's look in New York. Yeah, let's not buy a house in New York. That's not going to happen, is it? So we're like, we asked around, and a few friends were like, oh, go to Nashville. Let's like get loads of land there and stuff. Thank God we took their advice, because it's not like that now. It's really expensive. It's a nightmare in a way now. Yeah. It's like it's prohibitive, and I don't like that, because artists, I mean, that's why I love Berlin so much. My rent was dirt cheap, so was everyone's. It was like 2000 to 2008 I lived there. It's beautiful, It's really important.
Got a studio there. I assume this is at your place, is it?
Yeah, this is in Nashville. Yeah, that's right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love this room.
Is that how you work now? Do you kind of write and record and produce stuff in your studio, or do you go and work with other people when you're recording?
Yeah, both. I've done a few albums in here. Did the Jamie Lidell album in here. Did Building Up a Beginning in here. And then albums for Dave Stewart's daughter Kaya Stewart, and then recorded vocals for Muramasa. Nothing Matters, Nothing Else, I think it's called. And actually, funnily enough, when I did sort of my big, when I was a participant in a big pop song, the Haley Steinfeld song, Let Me Go, that Ali Tamposi I'd worked with here. She's a massive songwriter. We'd worked on a bit of music with her friend Rabel, another great artist and singer and stuff. And she'd remembered this room and really liked this room. And she was in town with Andrew Watt and Brian Lee, making music for, Kelly Clarkson in a big, cold Nashville SSL room.
Right.
It was just a grey Death Star in a way, this room. Very classic, the countertops, but it's the big grey desk. I mean, I had an SSL in here, but at the time I didn't. But it was just hard for them, I think, to get a vibe to write.
Yeah.
And she remembered this room being light. It's got lots of windows. It's a good positive room to write in. So she said, can we come and write over at yours and maybe with you? And I was like, yeah, great. So actually Let Me Go was written in this room as well. And, that's close to 1 billion streams, and that can happen from the bedroom,
That's amazing.
Not the bedroom, but it's the home studio.
Do you have a console there, or is it all kind of into Pro Tools?
No, I don't anymore. I've been through a lot of iterations, and I am getting a console actually now. I'm getting a console again, but a Zale AM1, which is a pretty special handmade German console, because whatever. I'm going for broke. But yeah, it's an amazing thing. I wouldn't buy any other console really, but I love consoles. That's the thing. I love them. I do have a small sidecar console by Spec, the company Spec, which is great. It's called a Lilo. It doesn't have any pre's. It doesn't have any EQ. It's a line level mixer only. Extremely clean. It's actually, you think it would be really boring, but just having aux sends on knobs,
right?
You can do it with MIDI controllers, but it is not the same. Not to me, because I like to do things where an effect is on the channel and its return is up. It's the dub stuff, and I think I had an interesting conversation with Stimming recently on the podcast, where he was like really upset about our reliance on the mouse and how we've got hands and we've got these beautiful expressive bodies, but we're limited to this to express ourselves, which is really true. I couldn't agree more. So I do, when I can, I like to get my hands on the faders. Every time I do that, I keep it. I'm like, oh, that was awesome. Right. Like the happy accidents that come from you jamming. And imagine like Lee Perry's music if it was all done on a computer, It's just...
Yeah, you don't have to think about it.
You have to perform. when you're on a console doing that kind of music. You have to be making music with the console. I love that. I'm definitely of the spirit, and the Super Collider, all of that was done. Christian taught me that as well. Like, we would never just let a performance roll to that on without doing anything. We'd have to interact with it. We'd have to do a few delay throws. We'd have to do a few like risky bits. And so every take is always different. And I think that's really, then it becomes a unique take, you know. So anyway, if I can work like that, I do. Yeah.
Yeah. We have some questions, because I'm just indulging myself here with my questions, but
how much water is in here? Oh, I'm joking.
It's just a camera trick. So okay, so we've got a question about podcasting. Yeah, so what made you make the move into podcasting?
Well, I think it was, I've got to give credit to my wife, because she knows I like to ramble. As you can tell now, I talk all day. And I love talking to fellow musicians, and I always have loved that. So it just felt like, hang on a minute, if you could sort of do that in a way that wasn't really formulaic. Like, I genuinely love just calling someone up and I don't have a plan when I do the podcast. It truly is just a hang,
right?
Which I hope is what is appealing about it, because I feel like it's just a free flowing conversation, you know. So yeah, it's really that. And then once I got a couple under my belt, I was quite excited. Like, one of the things that came to me that kind of struck me initially about podcasting was, early on, I got to interview Blake Mills and Sean Everett and stuff then, and Dave Stewart. Like, they're all in the first 5 episodes or something. I think it's really early on. It's about 4 years ago now. And I realised that I love Blake Mills. I'm a massive fan. And Sean, obviously, the head is definitely part of me paying attention to Sean and loving him so much and what he does. Right. He's definitely one of my mentors, even from afar. I just love his anarchic approach to making and recording stuff. But I don't think I would have been able to get in a room, as it were, with Blake Mills to make a bit of music without a lot of toing and froing, like, are you free? Can you record? What's the budget? Where are we going to go? La, la, la. But the prospect of kind of coming over for an hour to chat on a pod,
right? Yeah,
that's definitely possible. So I've really enjoyed the opportunity to meet all these people that I really admire and love and respect, you know. So that's been a really, I hadn't really thought of that as a benefit, but it's been great just to meet people, man.
Yeah, it's a brilliant time to have done it as well.
Yeah, totally. Exactly, yeah, right.
Yeah. Okay, someone's interested in more your sort of musical writing process.
Right.
I was kind of curious about that too, as whether you kind of ever compose into, you know, what in the studio, or whether it's a sort of separate songwriting process that you then record. And also, so how do you come up with harmonies and over top lines?
Right. That's a weird one for me. Well, maybe going to the first question, see if I can get that one together. I'd like to say, like, over the years, I definitely have benefited so much from collaboration, you know, with Christian, with the Suburb guys, Phil and Jason, and then with Mocky on the Multiply and Jim albums, and Chili Gonzalez and Peaches and all the people that were involved in those records. Feist as well, you know, because I was involved on her album, The Reminder, and got to see her process. And everyone does it different, and I'm a weird musician that doesn't sit. I do now. I've started taking piano lessons during this pandemic for the first time in my life. I can kind of play a few chords, but before that I couldn't play anything. You know, I was only going with sound, and I realized I think monophonically.
It's trombone background.
Yeah, it's my trombone and vocal background and the looping background, really. I even when I'm writing something, so I'm trying to write something for strings or something, I won't play it on the keyboard. I'll just sing in a bunch of counter lines.
Right.
That's kind of how I think about it, and that's maybe my answer to. That's how I think about music. Weirdly, I like it that way. I think. And nowadays it's maybe not quite as true because, like I said, I'm playing the piano and it's definitely opening up a lot of possibilities, but it's definitely frustrating me in some ways. Maybe this is why. So yeah, I think I go about writing music. Often my biggest sort of successes have been just what I like to do. There's a few ways. I really actually like this method, having lyrics first. This is actually my preferred method. This is what happened with a lot of my quote unquote biggest songs, whatever. And then it doesn't always happen this way. Of course, it doesn't happen this way. Because but if you do have a little lyrical idea, what I used to like to do is just sit in my kitchen in Berlin again. This kitchen was quite an important room. And then just record into the computer with no backing track, no click track, nothing. Just sort of start to think of the words and what a song could be. And then sing it like that, and then just sort of sing, then not even think about it, but just record another version where it's a lot slower with a different mindset. I'm like maybe doing it as a ballad or something. Then do it a lot quicker and see if it can be like a funk thing. And then sort of basically listen to those cold recordings and go, which one of those sort of feels like it could work? Which one just feels like it connects, and like you can kind of really save yourself a lot of time because it sounds amazing like this. Like Another Day was a good example of a song like that. It actually started out as a kind of a Simon and Garfunkel sort of folk thing, like just me one night. Actually, I wouldn't advocate this, but Mocky at the time, I was having a bit of writer's block. He goes, "Get yourself a bottle of whiskey," and so I was like, yeah, right. So I got a bottle of whiskey. There's a really good whiskey shop downstairs from me in Berlin. So I got a nice one, and I had a night dram, and I started just sort of like holding it down, like just playing guitar and just singing, mumbling some stuff into the phone, and it came to light. And then I was like, that's cool. I liked it, but then it took me, another thing that I like to do. I like to write in the kitchen. Yeah. I don't know. Chopping was what happened with Another Day. I was chopping a carrot and singing the little song, and it was kind of like my little backbeat, and it was way quicker than I'd been doing it. Do you know what I mean? And I was like, it could be it could be a totally different song. So I came into Mocky and I was like, hey, how about we do Another Day like a lot quicker? And it was just sort of like, I think you've got to carry ideas around with you. Sometimes you can just sort of spew it out. Like when I did a little bit more, that was just like, I came up with a melody. I thought, oh, that's cool. I know what this song should be about. And I just did a loop on the looper, and then it came right out. Right. And some songs you're chipping away at it for months. Like that song When I Come Back Around that I did. I literally had to go to Australia to finish that song because I was missing a part, and I just didn't know what it was until this guy was playing a word and he just was playing like, a really simple rhythmic phrase over the top of what I'd done. And all of a sudden it just all fell into place. And I was like, oh my God, this is it. We've done it. You've cracked the song. I was searching so long for this simple part, and like, I don't know. It's random. Anyway.
I'm just laughing because we had obviously probably one of the last questions coming was if you could give one piece of advice to someone starting out in their music career, what would it be? I'm guessing it's not go to Australia.
Although, go to Australia. That's actually quite a good piece of advice, I reckon, because you get in touch with beautiful nature and fish, if you like fish. If you swim with fish, if you don't like to eat them. And then... yeah, I don't know. I think Australia has been really important for me. Yeah. A lot of what's interesting about Australia, and I don't want to typecast the place, but I think they're a little bit like musical underdogs in a way, and they love music, and they're like so into it. It's like when you go there, like there's a passion for it. There's a little bit different to the sort of like the big scenes, as it were, which can get a little bit jaded a little bit. So yeah, actually, that's good advice. Go to Australia if you can. Yeah, off to Australia. Yeah, amazing.
But yeah, no, I mean, I don't know. Because and someone else has said about how's things changed. Since streaming. Obviously you expand across where you're making your living from sales and live shows, and then now it's.
I never made music selling albums.
No, okay.
Ever. I mean, that's the thing. before or after streaming. It got worse when streaming came in, obviously. But I've never been a big numbers guy. The thing for me was live. You know, what I like about live is it's something that you can control. You know what I mean? To an extent, at least. I feel like, well, for me, it was the way, and I think you can't often communicate the entirety of your being just on a record, because obviously that's impossible, and you sometimes you try to sort of button yourself up and present yourself a certain way, and it might be less appealing than the sort of more holistic version of yourself often you can kind of get across in a live show. So people start to see you and go, oh, this guy is, has got some good energy, and it sort of just makes more sense. They might actually prefer it to the albums. I think in my case that was often the case. But yeah, I didn't really see a difference with streaming. I just sort of, it's not great. It's really not great. I mean, it is. I feel bad. I tell you what, I've done a lot more co-writing. I did do a lot of co-writing. I had some good successes with Leanne LaHavis, obviously, and Muramasa and Haley Steinfeld and a bunch of others. But the streaming numbers, it's just hard to. It's hard to break past a certain threshold nowadays. And that threshold for a writer, unfortunately, because of the way that the splits are made with streaming, it's terrible for writers. So yeah, I really am really hard opposed to the 80-20 split and the streaming revenue from the master side perspective. It's skewed in totally the wrong way. They're going to have to address that, otherwise it's going to be a serious issue, I think. I mean, whatever. I'm not exactly saying anything new, am I? But at the same time,
well, I don't know. I mean, a lot of things you assume people know, maybe they don't. So it is really interesting to hear about that.
It's hard for writers. Yeah. I mean, that's why everyone wants syncs, because you get 50-50 on the master and pub split, which is how it should be on streaming. It should be 50 to the pub. I mean, that would change everything. I mean, they nudge it up a little bit and they're like, there you go, probably should be happy now. But it's like, it's not right. But anyway.
But getting out live is definitely...
Yes, I think so. But, I was lucky because I got to tour solo and then sort of brought home a little income from that.
Yeah.
And then later on, when I did my tour, my last band, I came out with 9 people and, obviously lost money. I mean, I've lost loads of money on tours. Basically, every time I toured America, I lost money. Even if I toured solo, like it was hard for me to break even, just because of the nature of the cost of travel and all the rest of the bits. And it was hard for me. I didn't have much of an audience here. I've never really broke America in any sizable way. I think that's often another really tricky thing for artists trying to come over here. You can maybe get the coasts. So you can do shows in, New York and LA or whatever, but what are you going to do when you get to Dakota? If you're going to take a bus tour, then there's a lot of America where you can't really make a buck. So it's tricky. There's a lot of practical things to it. You just sort of pick your markets and don't try to, There's a few moments in my career. Like I met Rick Rubin at one point in about 2008. They were interested in signing me for when I did the Gym album, but Warp Records wouldn't let me go, not to get too inside the track. But I thought at the time that was a travesty, I really wanted to go and be on, American or Columbia or whatever it was. Yeah. But I think I might have dodged a bullet there.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. I mean, you did say earlier on about, quite like the independence of having a label or major label to tell you what to do.
I think you got to know who you're in bed with. Because I think I've seen artists who have an indie mindset who are on a major label, and I'm like, you do realise it's just a business for them. Like if you don't turn enough profit, they'll ditch you. Because it's and I do feel like with some indie labels, like something like a Sub Pop or something, they're in it for the music, man. Do you know what I mean? And that's a hugely different thing. So you've got to know what you're doing. And if you are on a major label and you really want to grow it, they're going to be all about it. you know? So if that is your intention, if that is what you want, it's going to be aligned. So I think you have to be honest with yourself and try and align yourself with the correct people. Because it really upsets me when I've seen a lot of great, like, writers that have a lot of good ideas and everything, but they're shackled by their label deals and their A&Rs don't want to let them be something else. And I'm like, dude, the best thing that could happen for you is they ditch you. You know, because then I'd hear this music that I'm hearing you make for me now, they're not letting you do. Like, so that sort of stuff used to drive me a little bit bonkers.
Yeah.
But for some people, it's a great fit and it works so well. So you can't generalize. You've got, you know, honesty is important.
I really love what you said about when you were in Berlin and you just kind of took a very hard look and what are my skills?
Yeah,
what am I into?
right. Just had to. Yeah, exactly. That's a hard conversation to have potentially, but if you don't do it, then you'll find yourself years down the road going like, oh man, how did this happen? Do you know what I mean? Seriously, you can sort of kind of go with the flow a lot, especially if you've got pushy managers, you've got pushy people in your team. I mean, they might sort of have your interests at heart, but sometimes it's more their interests at heart, to be honest. So I think you've really got to just have those hard conversations. And artist types often don't want to do it because we're like little children. So that's sort of an adult mindset versus a childish one in a way, not to get too, you know, pub philosophy on it or whatever. But it is important, I think, at some point to just put the adult hat on before you make big decisions, at least. Yeah, then you can go crazy.
Well, thank you so much.
Pleasure.
For your time. This has been absolutely brilliant. I think you've definitely passed on some gems, as well as just some real interesting.
Well, thanks, man. I mean, like I said, I mean, the coffee was kicking in, so I think a good historical ramble can kind of get long.
That's great. I hope I wasn't indulging myself too much because I wanted to know all that stuff, but I'm sure.
Absolutely. Absolute pleasure, man. Yeah. Thanks so much for having me. And thanks, guys, for your questions. And, come along, check out Hanging Out with Audiophiles, the pod. I'm sure you'll, find a guest or two that you are interested in. It's been 4 years and I've had about 90 guests at this point, and everyone from Mark Ronson to Susan Rogers to, Wendy Melvoin from Prince and the Revolution, Blake Mills, Sean Everett. They're all there on the pod. Sorry for the blatant plug, but at the same time, I'm really proud of it. And I feel like there is a lot of great knowledge in there, not from me, from them. So I'm always happy just to share that, to be honest,
Yeah, well, there'll be a follow-up. Anyone who's registered will get a follow-up email from us, which will have the links to the podcast in, which is definitely good because it's a variety of guests, isn't it? So it's not just musicians, it's also engineers and people in the industry as well, like making stuff. No, I've tried to sort of, I mean, again, I've got no one telling me what to do. So if I feel like interviewing a really unknown, local guy, just because I think they're great, then they'll be on the show. And then next week it might be, some vastly different kind of character. So hopefully it's entertaining. But thank you. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
I'm going to just remind everybody that we have another one coming up. Amy Doherty, which is going to be fantastic on film scoring. But so it's just for me to say thank you very much again, and thank you everyone for coming and watching.
Brilliant.
We'll see you next time on The Inside Track.